Greetings and welcome to our monthly Applied Professional and Executive Coaching 101 with my co-host, Coach Mishti, based in Mumbai, India, and myself, Sam Zima, based out of Johannesburg, southern tip of Africa, a country called South Africa. That's how we are known, Mishti. Very easy name to remember. What is the name of that country in the south of the African continent? It can only be South Africa.
Yeah,
I like
Connected
that.
with
indeed.
you, I'm trying to figure out whether there's anything specific around your province is called Maharashtra. Am I right?
Yes, it
I
is.
don't know whether geographically I can say anything I've just said about South Africa. You do that for us. And then, of course, introduce our guest, but also start by just giving update as to what has happened prior
Yes.
to the show today. But otherwise, I'm looking forward to another conversations with you, fellow coaches, around what we do with clients and communities out there using our coaching methodologies to help them achieve what they intend to achieve. Over to you, Mishti, and greetings from South Africa, Africa to India.
Thank you so much, Sam. Greetings to you and greetings to all the wonderful viewers who are tuned in. May I start with an apology first? We were expecting Viswaroot Mukherjee, but due to a COVID crisis, he was not able to come in today. He's managing some crisis at work and in his personal space, so that has been a challenge. So we have been ready for crisis. we
Yeah.
It's become a resilient experience here in India because some situation or the other keeps coming in. But heartfelt apologies. And on that note, I still promise you that we'll have a very interesting discussion today because we have a wonderful coach, a very experienced coach and leadership facilitator with us who'll be sharing insights on coaching and also working with emerging markets. And before we go on to that, with your permission, may I introduce myself? My
Yeah,
name
sure.
is my name is Mishti Verma. I am a coach, a facilitator, and a gender sensitization expert. I work with a consulting company called OD Alternatives as a partner. ODA has partnered with over 300 organizations in their transformation journey, leadership development, and talent development. And we also have certifications in organization development and diversity and inclusion with the Tata Institute of Social Sciences. So, again, looking forward to a very interesting conversation today. And with great pleasure, may I introduce our guest today. Our guest is Coach Rahul Shah, a very experienced leadership facilitator and an HR professional with over 22 years of experience. He's worked with many countries, many populations. He's worked in France, he's worked with Cambodia, Singapore, Vietnam, and he's coached different kinds of populations. Besides that, his passion is to really mentor and coach the youth to catch him young and bring out their best potential. So, that is the brief introduction of Rahul Shah, but it doesn't do justice to his journey. So, we are going to understand more from him. Okay, so
Yes.
over to Sam, and then we'll take it forward.
Yeah, what a pleasure. Thank you very much, Coach Raul, for availing yourself at the last notice. And I always say that as coaches, we go into our coaching sessions ready to hear what our conversation partners, being our coaching clients, bring to the table. So I'm sure this was not a shock to your system. Am I right?
No, not at all. When I heard this is more of a conversation, and you're very open to having these kind of conversations, so I was very excited and happy and honored to be part of this conversation and see how I can be value to the all the viewers who are watching us across the world.
Beautiful, beautiful. In my previous work, I engaged a lot with emerging countries. But when I look at the list of countries that you worked in, I said, "Wow, I have never had the opportunity to work with these emerging markets: Vietnam, Philippines, Cambodia. Well, Dubai, we all know Dubai, Sri Lanka, and then of course France. That must be an immense experience in terms of diversity of cultures. Maybe let's give you the opportunity just to take us through your journey to here. And I know it's a big ask, but we certainly want to hear what insights you bring from such diverse countries as a coach, and what can we learn from your experiences.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. And as I'm talking to you, it's a privilege when you get opportunity to work across the globe. And I'm sure last 1.5 years, people would have seen that it's much easier to reach out when you're looking at doing all this online. And as I'm talking to you, I'm working with Kotavela. I'm working currently with one of the client in Africa, Durban, East Africa. So it's interesting to see that it is diverse, Sam and Misty. And what energizes me, when you initially go for having cross-cultural interaction, especially across the world and in these countries, you have a immediate worry that will you be able to connect with their culture, their mindset, their ways of working, their own challenges, right? So that concerns, it just gets collapsed after a few minutes of rapport building initial conversations, because we often forget that ultimately all of us are human. The emotion is similar. We laugh, we cry, we happy, we lose our patience, we get excited. So if you really notice, those are very similar across the world, across country, across culture. And that is what resonates when you're having these discussions. You have that worry, and it sounds very good that, oh, the person has such diverse experience. But if I look at, it's very humbling when you meet people in close quarters and accept the way they speak English and the mannerism. Everything else is fairly similar, because you will find that emotional connect. That's the ground zero where all of us relate with each other.
Wonderful.
And that has been very easy for me. When you go down to that path, then that diversity, the aura of that diversity just collapses, and you feel connected immediately. And I think I've used that as an advantage.
How did you prepare yourself for this assignment, Rahul? Or did you just go open-minded and then learn as you going along? How did that happen?
Yeah. So if I connect that to recent experience, I was speaking to 4 different culture, as I mentioned to you recently, just a couple of months back. Very 4 different country and 4 different culture. So when you look at that, when you approach the conversation, I think number one is you try to understand the context, the country context. What's the country? Because when you're coaching executives, because these are senior executives which I'm having a conversation. So there is a role context, there is a culture context, there is an environmental context, and there is an individual context. So you really have to study from those lenses. So if we look at the individual context, we use, I have often used the personality data as one data point, which helps you to understand, what are the characteristics of the individual who you're going to talk to. then you dive deeper into their role context. Are you speaking to a salesperson? Are you speaking to a marketing person? Are you speaking to a finance person? Are you speaking to an HR person? So you understand what kind of dynamics the individual will be surrounded by. Yeah, so you go with that clarity when you're approaching these dialogue. The third is, of course, the org context, which is what's the organization which you're working with and what is their culture like, and the country context. Because these leaders are playing with the in the political environment, they're working along with the governments, they're working along with the uh, the employees in that region. So if you understand that, then you are able to relate with their challenges. The importance for a coach is how can you relate with your challenge. And Sam and Misty, I'm sure you'll agree with me that today there are varied style of coaching. One of the coaching style is discovery-led coaching, where you allow the person to discover himself or herself through conversation. But the other side, the other school of thought is how do you make it challenging as well? Because it just cannot be discovery-led. You have to ask difficult questions. You have to create a rapport in such a manner that the person is able to see himself or herself in where the coach is challenging him or her. And very often we, as in our role, we become very, and I would say I used to become very easygoing coach rather than showing the mirror or really putting the person at difficult crossroads by making him or her feel that he is not facing himself. He's running away from his own challenges. So I think that challenging conversation also becomes very important, and that becomes easier when you understand and can empathize with their world, when you understand the role context, the org context, the culture context. And also a lot of times these informations are not available handily, so you have some kind of a prep which you need to do ahead of time.
I wanted all it there. That is the point I wanted to get to. Of the four contexts, I'm very interested in the country context because I'm sure there is no one standard formula that you can apply to each of the countries, because countries are at different levels. Hence, the idea of the emerging markets it make me very excited, because you are saying that you could get a coach coming from the most developed countries going into these countries, wanting to coach executives there, and probably coming with the thinking that I know it all, I've seen it all, I've coached all the executives all over the world. Then you come into a country where you're going to be struggling with the basics of the basics. And it is nothing wrong, nothing judgmental about the countries. It is just what it is. And that for me is what makes me, I'm very interested, because I still haven't come across a coaching program just for emerging markets. But I think in coaching we talk about context. So the emerging market is a context. And I want you to share with us, as a coach, and you are guiding other coaches around the country context, over and above just culture and diversity. What are the things that when you were going to Cambodia and you're going to all these countries, were the things that coming up and they stayed with you and you think are valuable for anyone who wants to coach in those contexts?
Yes. Just to add to what Sam was saying, that every context in terms of country is diverse. It's also rich, but it's also challenging, because every country will have its own etiquettes. And so even while you're talking about the country context and how does one coach in the emerging markets, is there something as a coach you would also follow in terms of etiquettes? Are you mindful of the etiquettes as well? Do you study the etiquettes as well? And keep that in mind while coaching, because people may be sensitive to certain etiquettes when it comes to the country context. So if you could, also share some views on that.
Sure, absolutely. And thank you, Misty and Sam, to share that. So I would say it's, at the forefront, it's these are hindsight, insight, if I may call that out. Because when you're going into it, these you may not be like perfect when you're getting into the conversations as such. So for example, I was doing a conversation for Dubai market last year, almost 12 months, 15 months back, and parallelly I had an assignment in another market. So Dubai as a market is very different because it's a melting pot from a culture standpoint, right? And some of these informations is fairly available because you know that that market is very different, and it is not and there are issues when you go into the conversation. Their issues are very different because they have challenges of trust. You would not trust with each other very quickly because you're looking at individuals as countries. You know, you're not looking at individual. You're not saying Misty. You're saying Misty India, Sam South Africa. You're making those kind of conversation. So if you understand that, you know what's the underlying tone when you're having a conversation with individuals in that market, right? And parallelly, like if I go to, I remember I went to Philippines and very limited idea on how the culture is, and very concerned how will I be accepted, what's that. I only knew Philippines as a friendly culture.
Yeah.
So it's a country which is very friendly, warm, and people will be very inclusive. So with that thought, I had gone. But what really helped me is whenever you go, like when I used to travel. Now you're not traveling for the last 2 years, but when I went traveled, I would befriend with everyone. Like I would go to the hotel, I will befriend with that individual to understand what that culture is, what are the things, what is the terminologies you would use to really create that rapport and have conversations. And to my advantage, like Philippines was interesting because I had a friend who had another friend who was an actor. She was an actor, local actor in Philippines, and she connected me to her. So the first thing I did before my conversations, I had like a leadership workshop, and so just 2 days before that, I made sure I had a conversation. I met her, and to my advantage, she was a known celebrity. So I clicked my snaps with her, and I clicked snaps with all the locals whenever I was to go to the market, with the hotels people. And my first 15 minutes of my conversation was just showing the participants how I believe Philippines is a friendly country. And I said, here is a stranger who entered 2 days back, and look at the collage of photographs in front of you. I met the actor, I met the taxi guy, I met the hotel chef, and look at how you've treated me.
Wow. So will you say that, there's this saying that the before you even become a coach, there is a coaching way of being in terms of your personality. So will you say that it is important for one to be interested in the country that is going into, starting from the airport when you are picked up by the taxi, you need to start the conversation there. That gives you insights into the country.
Absolutely. Like that, and it's so beautiful if you do that. Like Singapore, when I traveled in the with the taxi guy, he was so friendly, and I asked him, I'm surprised the way you're so friendly and so warm. He said, you know what? The first thing we are trained when we become a taxi driver by the government is you are the ambassador of Singapore, because every stranger who will meet you will be the first. You will be the first person will be met by the expats. And the way you behave will be the impression the individual will have of the country. So you are the ambassador of Singapore. So you can imagine the purpose statement which was made to the driver when he was getting trained.
As an ambassador of the country, welcoming all people who are so diverse. But coaches are very special people. Coaches and HR, in fact, all the helping professionals are very special, helping people who are not necessarily maybe having the same insights with us. Now you come there, you will do all sorts of things. You have this executive he might be an expatriate or he might just be a local, needing your services as an international coach to help them deal with the dynamics of their environment. Now you know that some of the difficulties these executives are faced with, they are created by themselves because of not being aware, unconscious incompetence. So now you're coming in and you unlock there, and you want to bring them to the level where you are, where they can appreciate everybody. Where do you start? I mean, I know you don't want to create an agenda for the client you are going to be coaching, but you want to start a conversation that will actually take you to the next level. Now you are Coach Rahul, you arrive, you've got this client sent to you by head office to help this client in an emerging market, or the other way around. Now, take
What
us
is the
through the
starting
journey.
point? What is the
Yeah,
starting point? And
absolutely.
also, another thing that I wanted to add, you shared some very interesting insights in terms of, connecting with the celebrities. So you're creating common points of connect. So in
Yeah.
India, they say, if you want to build rapport, you talk about Bollywood, you talk about cricket, you talk about politics. So in different countries, do you follow different styles and some a universal way of figuring out what are the highlights of conversations, especially walking into a workshop setting and trying to use those conversation points to build the rapport and start the journey.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, that's very important. Like you see, your earlier question on how what are the do's and don'ts when you're looking at the culture and when you're having those initial dialogue, how are you able to make sure that uh, you are someone who is neutral. And Sam,
Mm,
to your point that the importance of you are not coming across someone who's been sent by headquarters to change you. That impression, and you
Yeah.
can figure that out within 10 minutes of conversation. You can figure that out that the person is feeling that everything which he or she will speak is getting recorded in the coach's mind, and you will see that the individual will put walls, and that's not a fruitful conversation for a coach. Yeah,
Mm.
and I'm sure we learn in our coaching lessons, and it's very difficult. That empathy piece, it's not easy. We know, we understand, but really demonstrating that empathy, that I can understand your pain and I can see where you're coming from, I think that differentiates between a good coach and the best coach. How you're able
mm,
to articulate that and show that you're vulnerable. So I think the first half an hour, Sam and Misty, would be very important when you're having
mm,
this dialogue where you're neutralizing that I'm interested in you and your journey
mm, mm,
and your challenges. So I often don't interrupt, cross question in the first 20, 25 minutes of the discussion. For me, if I look at my style of coaching, I am very context coach, which means I spend a lot of time in understanding the individual's context from the individual themselves, because that
mm,
becomes very important, so that he or she feels that the coach doesn't have an ulterior motive. He's understanding me basis how I'm painting myself to him and my environment. He's not come prepared with his own pre assumptions about my world.
mm,
So if I have established that kind of connect with him in the first 15, 20 minutes or half an hour, that I don't have any background of who you are. I am understanding you basis you make me understand who you are. And I trust you completely on that. And if I've established that and I've seen 9 out of 10 times, then the coach has an advantage that the person feels that you were heard by someone, because the advantage coaches has irrespective is that the person will listen, and very rarely you get that time to pause, because senior executives don't get time to talk aloud. They don't speak to their spouse. Their managers don't have time to have so much conversation where they'll give 90 minutes, 1.5 hours to just share their perspective. They're always in the run. So this
Yeah.
pause moment is very well appreciated, unless there is no value in that conversation. So in the first half an hour, of course, they'll appreciate that the person is hear you. And then once you move into the second segment, where the individual starts seeing the value, he or she starts seeing how I am my own challenge, and I have created stories in my own
mm,
head about
mm,
people, situations, issues, and I have to change. I think those value adds, if you don't provide that in the later half of the conversation is not meaningful. But just to quickly answer your question, I would say that first 20-25 minutes of rapport building and empathy, connecting to the empathy in the true sense, becomes the most powerful way to show that you're not someone who's come from headquarters to just put something to rest, but you're here to help.
There's a lot
Let's
of
talk about,
neutrality.
yeah, Mishti.
Yes. So there's a lot of neutrality in the first 20 minutes of the conversation. And I hear that you talk about a lot of observation as well. So what I hear you say is that you really need to observe the dynamics in the first 20 minutes. You need to observe the context a lot. So can you just tell us a little more about observation and how important that is in the entire coaching journey?
Sure. No, I think that's very very critical, because you'll realize, like, just last month I'm remembering of one conversation where this individual was just not opening up. It was seeming as if he, because every time he used to share an issue, he used to paint it in a manner that how that issue is not created by me, and he's trying to position himself that if you're trying to understand me, I'm not the issue here. See, this guy is an issue, or this situation is an issue, or the culture is an issue. I'm not the issue. So then you're understanding that the person is not opening up. He is not, and I know from the personality context, and sometimes these report helps, because I know this person is someone who has who doesn't trust easily. He's highly skeptic as a person.
Yeah.
You know that because you know the personality context when you've seen the report. So if you've seen the report, you're not surprised that the individuals are also painting. So you are nudging to see if the person opens up. He said, then you're trying to cross question. If you've seen that pattern, Misty, in the first 15 minutes of the conversation, the questions I would ask is, how is it back at other places? Let's take off work. Let's look at home. Let's look at extracurricular activities which you do. So like this one leader who realized that he has a huge emotional outburst, which he relaxed a lot. So he never felt that he had emotional outburst. He said, I have really worked hard on the emotional outburst field. But when I asked him some questions on the extracurricular activity, he said, when I play cricket, I have the huge emotional outburst. And when I'm winning or losing a game, and then he could connect that how that emotional outburst has not completely gone out of him. It's just that the setting has changed. In corporate setting, he has suppressed it, but in non-corporate setting, he's still expressing it. So somewhere he was defending that he has changed, but actually he has not changed. He's actually suppressed these two emotions. So you have to keep watching the choice of words, the way they are, and what's the pattern of the conversation. Because in the start, the person would have said, so therefore, I would say a coach is a master integrator. When I use the word master integrator, what the person has said in the first 10 minutes and what the person is saying at the 45th minute, can you integrate and quickly create a pattern and see? And then you concretize it. You are not judging the person. You're concretizing by cross-questioning. Because that is the art of a coach, that he or she is non-judgmental, but he checks for concreteness. Is there a concreteness to my hypothesis, or it's just a hypothesis which is not correct in this current situation? So I think that takes a lot of energy, because you're listening and you're making those hypotheses, and that is the mastery of a coach, as I would call out.
Let's look at this scenario. The executives will often finance the coaching programs to assist other executives in whatever locations they are, sending you as a dependable coach that they've experienced working with you. But I often find that in many cases, they will be very much interested in the performance coaching, even though they don't say that. They'll say, listen, we have this executive out there that needs help. And we wonder what the issues are, but we want you to help. At the back of their mind, they said, help him so that he can deliver the results we are looking forward to. Now, when you arrive in the session with the client and you speak to the client using the conversational coaching approach, context approach, and then you find that the issues are lying very much squarely in the individual context and nowhere else. But this is never get discussed because in the company we don't discuss personal issues. Now you are stuck between the rock and the in the face. You know what do? You can't prescribe. You have a three-party relationship contract, and the sponsor side is very strong because that's why they called you. This one you have to dig it out to say, my friend, I think you need help. And what do you do as a coach, especially in cultures where people don't open up?
Wonderful.
That's a good question, Sam. And I think as a coach, and I'm sure people who are listening, and I'm sure you and Misty would have also gone through this, is it puts you into a spot, and it often it happens in situations where you see the coaching contract is loosely created. Because you realize, like, a lot of times I've seen experiences where the manager and the team member is not talking, and the manager is feeling that if I speak to him, it will be difficult and it will impact whatever performance I'm getting. But this guy is not moving to the next level, but I cannot have a conflicting conversation, and I can see that. So what the manager will do is he will run to the HR and say, can we find an executive coach? And the HR will reach out and say, okay, we need a coach for this person. And the question really then is what role managers play, because the coach cannot play the manager's role. But if the manager wants the performance, coach cannot ask for performance on behalf of the manager. You have to be very careful of what you can do and what you cannot do, because there is a sponsor, there is a manager, and there is a coach. And if you don't contract that very well, what's the goals of it? And of course, there is a coachee himself. So I would say if you triangulate, and if you don't contract it, Sam, it becomes challenging. And I would say 50% of conversations are non-contracted, where there is no clarity. The point which you mentioned, because when you dig deeper, you realize that there's a deep issue the individual has. The organization not giving him raise. He is getting tremendous offers outside, and organization looking at potential pushing him to the next level of executive, but he's not getting that role which he's asking and demanding all through. So what are you talking? Because your coaching stops there, because there's clarity, there is clear what the individual wants, but the organization is not giving. But he's saying that, okay, make him change. It will not happen. So you have to go back to the drawing board and have conversation with the sponsor, have a conversation with the coach, because sometimes coach has to stick their neck out and say, this is beyond us. I cannot, what I am hearing and what is being communicated, I think this is not part of the scope. And I don't think so I have a role in this. Very often, a coach gets defeated because the sponsor has hired him. So he has to play that agenda of managing or communicating what the sponsor is asking him to do. And at the same time, to build a rapport with the individual so that the individual becomes vulnerable and he opens up his pain. And you realize, if you empathize with him, his pain is really true. And there is a issue between the sponsor and the manager, which he has to. So very often, like in one of the conversations, specific example is where I would encourage the coachee to have that dialogue, because there are certain rules of contract where you cannot speak everything what the coach is telling you to the sponsor and the coach. So you have to be careful. You have to be abided by that terms also. You cannot breach the confidentiality. At the same time, give thematic message. But can you encourage the coachee and inspire him or her to have a direct dialogue? Make him prepared to have a dialogue with the sponsor and the manager and have a courageous conversation. So I think that it's very case to case, Sam. But the point is, the coach has to stick the neck out sometimes, because they are under immense pressure and somebody is using their shoulders to shoot. I'm sorry to say and use that word, but it happens in the real world, where you are, and the moment you realize that's happening, I think it's important to call that out and share what is possible and what is not possible. And at the same time, I understand the coaches, the coaching fraternity which is hearing, they'll say, hey, easier said than done. You know, you will laugh at the statement.
I often said that something that puts us executive coaches in trouble is that these people are under pressure to deliver life-saving results, if I may use that. And you see it through them that they are stressed. So I do believe that it's a very serious space, but it is what I hear you saying is the delivery of the results is not that direct. It's not like you're working on something and when done, the results come in. You work on the complexities, as you have mentioned, those contexts. And when those things are addressed and the individual's challenges are addressed, individuals should be able to actually do what is hired to do because they have qualifications, they have experience, they have expertise. That's why they are on the job. So these are the noises that are caused by the context that you want to make them aware, conscientize their sponsors that I don't necessarily work on the performance plan of this person. I work on the things that will enable this person to deliver what he agreed with you. And that sometimes is not immediately evident. It requires patience that people move from the current state of being and slowly, after a while, you produce a star. In other words, I have a feeling that in the contracting as coaches, we need to bring this across. And actually, the way we contract, we need to negotiate for this valuable asset called time. The fact that I'm taking you through 12 months doesn't mean that at the end of the 12-month coaching session, I have delivered. Maybe it's another 12 months before you see the impact of my coaching
or earlier, Sam, for all you know, it could be earlier as well.
Absolutely.
I have finished by 8th month and I don't be required. Am I courageous to say that, hey, I think no more, my need is there in the 8th month, though the contract is 12 months.
So or perhaps there could be another issue that emerge, and then if they feel you're still the right coach to do that, then they can recontract with you.
Yes. Absolutely. So the journey is a little fluid in that sense, and it's not that specific to an ROI here. It's about constantly clarifying the expectations and coming together to agree on what the deliverables are. So I feel at every point you are constantly clarifying expectations, and what you've been talking about, Rahul, sounds like a very strong balancing act between the stakeholders and the individuals that are being coached. So
just couple of weeks back, Misty, one of the example comes to my mind is couple of weeks back I was having this conversation with a new manager who's got transitioned into a new role. He was now a sub-region head, which means East Africa, Middle East, Africa region. So everything is coming under him. And we had an individual development plan discussion. And as a part of a check-in, it's important to get in the manager also. So we established the contract, identified what the areas from a development lens, and we said, okay, let's go to the manager and have a conversation with the manager, what he thinks should be these priority areas. And he had a conversation with the manager, and the manager took over the entire conversation, and he went into a various dimension. And I could see the coachee literally freezed. He just couldn't speak in front of the manager, not defend why he has picked up some of these. And I was quite surprised. I was trying to paint why he has, and I was trying to coax him. Hey, you know what? We discussed that decision making is a strength of yours. Why didn't you tell that this is one of the reasons why we have picked up this? So he was doing it at a very shallow level. He didn't come across as very strong. And immediately after that conversation, I had a half an hour discussion, and I realized that he had a huge fear with the stakeholder. Imagine if you're an immediate manager who's, of course, and he's not able to have a conversation. So like Sam, what you said, a new need emerged out of a contract where how he has to handle his conversation with the manager and feel comfortable to push back. And these are new insights which comes in when you do this check-in conversation,
Yeah.
Misty, so that
Yes.
you are not too broad, because then you're getting to specific and you're giving specific help. Sometimes it could be beyond scope as well.
Absolutely.
Mm.
And Rahul, another thing that you just mentioned about how this individual really froze, with fear. So, in my experience as a coach, and when we do a lot of sessions for organizations, I realize whenever you're taking feedback from employees, employees are very hesitant to talk or share because they feel that that feedback will go to the management or go to their managers, and then they'll get into trouble. Lack of a better word. So, how do you solve that problem for them and help them open up and give them that trust that it is okay to share because you're here to solve the bigger problem. uh, so that is a challenge that I have come across a lot. So what are your insights on that?
Sure, and I don't know. I'm gonna use this. I often use some of these techniques. One of the technique is Misty. You would know. It's called psychodrama.
Yeah.
Sam, I'm not sure
Yeah.
if you're aware
Yeah.
of that.
Yeah. Hmm.
Which is a beautiful technique where one of the things which a coach role is to build coach's muscle, and the muscle of the coachee cannot come in by just having conversation. You have to role model it or role play for him,
Mm,
right? So I often do that role play activity where I will ask him that, like an empty chair kind of an exercise. We make
Yes.
him do that. Okay,
mm,
imagine if this
mm,
person is your manager, how would you have the
Yeah.
conversation?
Yeah.
Now the person
mm,
says it, I will do it this way, but when he embodies that, actually
Hmm.
doing it, it's a very different, and it's a safe environment because he's doing, or he or she is doing, in the presence of a coach. So
Yeah.
whatever change he has to make, he or she is making in that safe environment. So that often becomes a great tool when you use these tools, as
Yeah.
not just only
I
using it
love
on
I
this.
love the empty
Yeah,
chair
empty chair.
role
Absolutely,
modeling.
Sam.
It's a very famous one, and I'm
Mm,
glad you bring in this because this show is really intended at practicing coaches. Of course, even the people who buy coaching from us, so that they can understand how we work. And I'm glad you bring this. And I wanted to ask you to say, do you find value in us as coaches reflecting on back onto ourselves how we actually handle the clients, because you've just given me a good example of how we deliver value to the clients, and how often do we really critically look at the coaching methodologies we use, or we just allow clients to get used to our patterns, our way of doing, and then we go on run them through all the sessions. And I think that for me is another conversation. And you just made a good example there. How do you build the muscles of the coachee? That's one way. Mishti has asked, how do you create a safe space for the employees to talk about their company without fearing that the coach will actually divulge what was discussed to the sponsors? I
mm.
also raised the question of saying uh, the conflict between the sponsors' expectations and those of the coach and the coachee. How do we manage those? Because those are dynamics that actually can affect the value of your coaching delivery.
That's
Let's talk to
wonderful,
coaches.
Sam.
Let's talk to coaches.
That's wonderful. In fact, I would call it telepathy because I was when he was talking about psychodrama, and I'm also trained in psychodrama. So, we had an exchange of smiles on that conversation. So, in psychodrama, initially, it's also about understanding what role do you bring to the group. So, there is a concept about what role do you bring. So, in tapping into your own roles, your own strengths is quite essential. So I would like to talk about two concepts which Sam you also spoke about. One is about creating safe space, which is so critical in facilitation, in counseling, and in coaching, and also in techniques of psychodrama. If Rahul, you can just share a little bit about that, and also from the psychodramatic perspective, how do you strengthen that role for besides the empty chair? Do you also dabble on what that role is in terms of how the coach can approach the manager, and how do you strengthen the role essentially from a psychodrama perspective as a part of yourself that needs to be strengthened and addressed. So what any technique that you do to strengthen that aspect of the personality or that role of the personality that builds that kind of courage or muscle to address these issues and challenges?
So I think, Mr. I think it's just that I would say it's about doing it and then making them reflect. And I don't know, in the current, I mean, sometimes it's possible where the coach is actually going in the setting of like some of the executive coaches actually go for board meetings along with their coaching, where you are going into the live scenario so that you're auditing how the individual is doing and what the individual is doing. There are several settings which allows you to do that, and that's an awesome way. I forget the name. What's called? It's called live play. I'm not sure the name. It's live play or something like that, which is called as. So that's another way of doing it, where you're actually preparing the person and then going live in the setting and seeing it yourself as a coach and seeing what was possible and what was not possible as an individual. So I think it's a muscle which cannot be developed overnight. It's you're constantly at it and seeing and then reflecting on saying, oh, what worked, what didn't work, what needs to change now, what are the different conversations you need to do to shift that. I think that's a dialogue which you're having more consistently. But if you're embodying it in some form, if you're playing it out, I think it becomes much easier than I would say just talking aloud around it. So yeah,
I guess, just sorry for interjecting, I guess we all as coaches suffer from the lack of insights in real life situations for our clients. We trust that they tell us the stories, whatever they tell us we can work on. So what if they're not telling us the truth, or they're not telling you the full story? So there's always an element of we can't take the responsibility to full extent for the behavior of our clients in a real situation. And if we are invited into that real situation, they might just be acting on that day.
Yeah.
And again, you still don't get it.
Yeah, and I think Sam, for that, I would say that as a coach, the other thing I would also call out for all the coaches who are listening as a fraternity is: can you be a coachee? Because if you're not a coachee, it's very difficult to connect and realize what happens. So I'm a coach, but I'm also a coachee, which means I'm also undergoing coaching conversations. And one of the insight which came in is while I was going through a coaching conversation, that I was trying to be a pleaser to the coach. So I was doing things to please him or to gain impression or have a good impression. And that was a strong insight, because then I could realize if I, as a coachee, is impressing my coach, which means suddenly the rapport has gone off. I'm not vulnerable. I am just saying things which is likable. I'm not being myself. And the same is true when the coachee is having a conversation with you. So is the aura of coach is such that the coachees become likable because he's trying to show that I should be likable in coach eyes. Then you have lost the game, because then you are seeing that the person is saying things to gain that impression, not being what you are. And that's a very thin line to observe and quickly get off that, because the moment you realize it, because you'll see the rapport is not strong, then you are still the individual is not fully there. You're not the coachee is not fully with you.
I have a practical example where, with this particular executive, in the earlier stages of our coaching relationship, it was very difficult to use what we call challenging coaching, where you tell it like it is, because they were very sensitive, to being told the truth. And I must tell you, I worked on that for quite a very, very long time. And at some point, I thought we were not going to crack it. But I must tell you, the beauty of where we are now is like, it's like then you say, but so it means some of the things that we were doing was not really coaching. I said, I was pushed into a situation where I just failed to apply the true coaching approach to you because you were not receptive and the relationship wasn't established enough for me to tell it like it is. But I'm very glad that through supervision, so I got to a point where I realized that I'm failing myself, actually, because if you're staying in this relationship and you are not telling this executive the wrongs that they are doing, you are not helping them and they're not getting value for money. So the message for me to us as fellow coaches is that sometimes it's going to take a very long time, especially when you're working at the top end of the leadership, to build the rapport that you require to be able to tell it like it is. But when you get to that point, I tell you, they will see return on investment in an amazing way. So that's just my own experience, because we do feel vulnerable as coaches too sometimes.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
And I think just to that point, you realize that we take ourselves sometimes very seriously, because I had an advantage of in one of the organization, 4 coachee, same organization, different levels, same levels, and 4 departments, and I could see that all the 4 has taken very different path from me. One coachee was so non-actionable, and the 4th coachee was so action oriented, and he used to do whatever he committed to do. And I stepped back and thought that to get the best out of the coach is also coachee's responsibility. As a coach, I have to do my best, but the coachee's responsibility is to get the best out of the coach. And if he or she is not doing it, it's a disservice which he or she is doing for himself.
Yeah.
It's wonderfully said.
It's a partnership.
In fact,
it's a partnership.
Yes. Yeah. In fact, we
often, sorry, Ms. Shifo, sorry, I'm talking over you. We often wait too long to emphasize that this is a partnership, and therefore the success of it depends on all of us, not only the coach.
Yes.
Sorry, Ms.
Yes. So the contracting is not only with the management. The contracting is a lot with the coachee as well, in terms of clarifying the trust, the expectations, and what overall the norms are expected. So, also, we were talking about what you were saying, that you were working with these 4 different coaches and one was not at all responsive. So I remembered a saying that in coaching it is that not everyone can be coached, and you have to realize that at some point that this person is not ready, or you may not be the right coach for that person, because everyone is looking for a different style at times. And when you said that as coaches we should not take ourselves so seriously, that it's a task that needs to be delivered. So how comfortable are you with the idea that there could be a coachee that may not want the coaching that you're offering, and the fact that not everyone can be coached, and how do you deal with that?
Yeah, and I think there's a saying which comes to my head is when the student is ready, teacher arrives. Isn't it? That's true, and you cannot wait for the student to be ready also at the same time, right? You have to get the deliverables, as Sam you were sharing upfront. So it's important for the coach to share, and I think this is where the challenging coaches feedback comes in. Very often we don't give feedback to the coachee that, hey, you canceled last meeting, you coming late for 3 meetings, you come 15 minutes, 20 minutes late, and everything what we discussed, it seems you have forgotten, or you were not able to work on it because there was too much pressure back at the workplace. Yeah. So I'm finding, I would say, muster the courage. I'm finding I want to recheck what's the value we are deriving out of this conversation. What value are you feeling? It's important that you're investing your time and effort and energy, and I'm investing my time and energy. And are we accruing the value which you want? or we should relook at this, delay the engagement, defer this for some few weeks and get things ready. I mean, really having that open dialogue is very, very critical. And if you don't do that, you're suffering internally. And I feel there's an integrity issue in my heart and mind, because I'm getting paid for nothing. And I may not enjoy that. I'm getting paid. It's a great thing to have. You're just doing nothing, but you're doing disservice for everyone.
Yeah, I find that to be the most difficult thing for the coaches. And I think it's a quality that we need to acquire, and the training that perhaps we need to undergo, because sometimes we, like you're saying, things happen that are not right and they need to be addressed. And I always say that sometimes we overplay this saying that try to not be involved into logistical aspects of your coaching program and whatnot. And that's why we employ coaching assistants or administrators. And often we say, please, can you just tell that client that they must stick to the time, please. So they must come late. And what I hear you saying is that actually it is part of our deliverables that we give them feedback on the behaviors that they might be doing somewhere else that they are doing to you.
Yeah. And the importance is behavior. So it's factual. You're not like, oh, I feel, I think.
Yeah.
You're talking concrete by giving examples of what has happened.
Yeah.
So, Rahul, I hear you use the word concrete a lot, in our conversation today, that it is important for you to concretize the conversations, the feelings, the behaviors. So, I would want to, before we go on to concluding the conversation, I want to hear a little bit about Coach Rahul. What concretizes the whole experiences that Coach Rahul has had? What are his strengths? What are his qualities? And why concretizing is something that's so important for you?
Sure. So if I just take you through the journey of how I have reached where I have reached, I think I don't know, it'd be interesting for others to know. But I'm not come from diverse background. So very, very often when you graduate, you need clarity, what you want to do. And likewise, I also wanted that clarity, what I wanted to do. And I had no idea. And I'm sure all of us will agree that very often it's so clouded. So I realized I should strike off what I don't want to do rather than what I want to do. Because I said, I'll hit what I want to do, but what I don't want to do. So I dabbled in my career's initial years in sales, and then I moved into event management. And I realized very soon, within 3 to 4 years, that these are the things which I don't want to do. And I used to be a sales trainer a lot. I used to go on the forefront and talk how sales should happen, and that's when I realized there's a spark in the dark tunnel that maybe this is what I want to do. And when I realized what I want to do in 6 years in my post-graduation career, nobody was giving you a job, because when you know what you want to do, it's become more difficult. Things go away. And I thought, okay, I want to be a good trainer. And I never got a job, and I was like getting frustrated. I said, what do I do? So I realized I need to design my career. So I did that. I picked up my management course from a reputed institute in India called Nasi Monji. I did my MBA from there. And then I realized I need to have teaching experience. So I approached my management college, can I teach? And to my fortune, they gave me assignments to teach at undergraduates. And that was a good formative experience for me, what it takes to actually stand up and deliver programs in front of students or a class. And I did that for 3 years.
Do you mind just holding it there? This is very interesting. I hope you have few minutes still remaining when we come back to talk exactly on these issues. And thanks for that question, Mishti. When we come back, we will spend a few minutes. We won't hold you that long. We'll spend a few minutes and talking around this, because this is fundamental, if you don't mind. We'll be back.